There are a lot of reasons to watch the Mission Impossible movies. The nifty spy tech and exotic locales, the cloak and dagger twists and cheesy MacGuffins, old faces like Luther and Benji, and cool new pals like Ilsa Faust. But if you're sitting down with your popcorn in the theater, you probably paid to see whatever wild, extremely dangerous situation Tom Cruise cooked up for himself this time. The man has dangled from planes and jumped out of them. He's learned to fly a helicopter and hold his breath longer than humanly possible. He climbed the world's tallest skyscraper and rode motorcycles off of massive cliffs, all in the name of entertaining you and keeping the dream of cinema alive. Between the big stunts of Mission Impossible, there's a constant supply of practical action excellence throughout the series, with wild stories and jaw-dropping behind-the-scenes footage for days. Craft and discipline oozes out of every single chase scene, fistfight, and explosion. To watch Cruise and company in action is to witness a modern marvel. So, your mission, should you choose to accept it, sit back, grit your teeth, and shake your head as you learn about how one madman with a plan put the movie industry on his back and teamed up with the hardest working people in Hollywood to deliver the greatest spectacles ever witnessed on the big screen. This is the 30-year evolution of Mission Impossible stunts. Tom Cruise had been trying to get a reboot of the 60s TV series Mission Impossible off the ground since 1992, but the project languished in development hell until a crucial dinner with Steven Spielberg. The two men were neighbors at the time, meeting regularly to geek out over movies, and one night, Brian De Palma just happened to be there. Cruise was always a fan of the Carrie and Blowout director, but after going home and binging his entire filmography over the next 14 hours, he knew De Palma was the man for the mission. Still, it's not exactly the kind of director you'd expect if you're someone who came to Mission Impossible movies late. While he's a master at creating simmering psychosexual tension that builds to a cathartic release, a la his idol Alfred Hitchcock, he's not really the guy you go to if you want massive explosions and bombastic stunt set pieces. Mission Impossible 1 isn't really that kind of movie, unless endless talk of knock lists and cryptic Bible verses gets your adrenaline pumping. Still, there are some extremely impressive sequences that are worth looking into. The Prague Embassy mission is pure De Palma, guiding us through each step of the plan as our highly trained IMF agents play their parts perfectly thanks to the series' trademark masks, designed here by the Thing legend Rob Bottin, and, we'll be honest, looking kinda dicey. It's great how they didn't have just another actor portrayed the disguise. They just dressed up Cruise as an old guy who just so happened to look like the love child of Maverick and Ross Perot. Then, in what was a pretty shocking twist at the time, everything goes horribly wrong and the team is picked off one by one. Nothing too flashy as far as stunt work is concerned, but thanks to the characters' comically large camera glasses, we get to see the horror unfold through their eyes, at least until Emilio Estevez gets an elevator spike jammed through his. De Palma's slow burn style initially called for a modest budget, but Cruise knew that he had to pull out all the stops for his first time in the producer's chair. Sweet sleight of hand tricks weren't gonna cut it. He wanted something big and flashy to cement his action bona fides, so he came up with a stunt that nearly got him killed. At a restaurant in Prague, when Hunt realizes that his boss's boss, Kittredge, is fixing to finger him as the mole within IMF, he devises an explosive getaway thanks to some sci-fi gum given to him by Agent Gordon Bombay. Now, it's easy to imagine a more subdued version with a mild explosion so Hunt can pull off the old ninja vanish. But in what will become a recurring theme throughout the production of the franchise, Cruise knew he could do better. So they came up with the Czech Republic's first ever restaurant/aquarium concept and built it on a soundstage. An enormous lobster tank frames the tense conversation, filmed at canted angles as Ethan feels the walls close in around him, all lined with fish tanks around and above the diners' heads.
Because the weight of the water, the framework around where he was going through was solid steel, so we had to be so precise in the way he went through that window. I think it was probably one of the most rehearsed jobs I ever done on a picture.
Plan was blow the tanks, yank this dude out of the way, and have crews jump through a window just as 16,000 tons of water crashes down behind him. The timing had to be absolutely perfect or Tom could have drowned. They tried it with a stunt double, but there was no substitute for the real deal.
So what happened is that they blew the tank out behind me first. So you hear 1, 2, then, and on 2, the tank behind me blew out, and then 3. So it took everything in my power to stay there for 3. The guy came up to me, he said, look, I'm gonna count to 3. He said, don't go on 3.5. He said, I'll be watching you, but I'm gonna count to 3, and on 3, that's when I'm gonna do it, okay? And I said, hold it. 1, 2, 3, go, or 1, 2, go.
1, 2, 3.
And to seal the illusion, they brought a bunch of water to Prague and filmed some on-location shots of Tom doing what he does best, running away intensely.
They done a shot of him running away, Walter just rushing out after him with all the false lobsters and everything in Prague. So you got the outlook of Prague in the background, but looking at the restaurant was at Palmer Studios.
The restaurant explosion was awesome, but the Langley heist is iconic. Having decided to steal the MacGuffin himself, Cruise recruits master hacker Luther Stickle and dirtbag pilot Jean Reno. Spoiler alert, one of these men will betray Ethan Hunt, while one will appear in every single Mission Impossible movie. Ving Rhames, you've just secured yourself a bag. The Langley sequence was inspired by the heist films of Jules Dassin, like 1955's Rififi and especially 1964's Top Copy, in which a gang of thieves infiltrate a museum by hanging from the ceiling and silently steal an emerald-encrusted dagger. That sure beats a knock list. So Hunt and his crew have to download an Excel file onto an extremely sexy 640 megabyte magneto optical disc. And they have to do it on a desktop that's locked away in a room that'll raise the alarm if it detects any sound, any change in temperature, or any pressure on the floor. The only way in is up.
And you really think we can do this?
We're going to do it. Some of the most riveting sequences in the film are actually part of that sequence, and it's not a question of blowing anything up. It's Brian De Palma's superb expertise at creating tension.
Now, everyone knew the room itself had to look cool, like, I don't know, something out of Star Wars, just slightly more plausible. Lucky for them, Mission Impossible filmed in the UK's legendary Pinewood Studios, the same place as Star Wars, and they'd happened to hire Norman Reynolds, the production designer responsible for the look of the original trilogy. They more or less said, hey, can you make us a Death Star?
That was very difficult, actually, because you're hanging upside down for a long period of time. I don't know if you've ever done that,
Balancing on that harness required the agility and core strength of a Cirque du Soleil performer, but Cruise pulled it off with grace, poise, and a few bruises.
The most difficult part of that is there was a point where I dropped down.
And it was all done by hand and weights. He just had 2 guys on there that, feeding him up and feeding him down, just stopping him.
Or doing their best to stop him anyway, because Cruise kept whacking his head on the floor.
And I remember we were running out of time, and I went down to the floor and I kept hitting my face, hitting my face, and the take didn't work. And we were running out of time. We had a lot we had to do. So I went up to the stunt guys and I said, give me, coins. Here in England, they have pound coins. So I put pound coins in and I hung on the cables to see was I level.
Now, with the late Elizabeth III providing crucial counterbalance in his feet, Cruise and company pulled off one of the most suspenseful and exhausting scenes of all time.
So I went down, started the computer, went all the way down, and beautiful set, like De Palma has got amazing taste. Went down on the floor, and I didn't touch, and I remember I was there, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't touch. And I was holding it, and I'm sweating, and then he just keeps rolling. And I just realized...
And they still weren't done. The film climaxes in an explosive and highly implausible chase sequence in which Jean Reno tries to extract the traitorous Jim Phelps from a high-speed train blasting through the English Channel Tunnel. Now, after personally securing permission from the French TMV to use their real trains, it quickly became apparent that a fistfight on the roof of a 200 miles per hour locomotive wasn't feasible to film for real yet. So, aside from a few long shots, the majority of the 152 shots in the 7-minute 20-second sequence were created by Industrial Light and Magic. That's not to dismiss it. There are tons of VFX shots in every single Mission Impossible movie, most of which you don't even notice. And it's not like Cruise used a stunt performer to double for his live action elements. He spent 6 weeks climbing over train carriages and helicopter rigs in front of a massive wind machine.
You know, I mean, when we're on the train, you really had to hang on to the train. And I think it added a wonderful reality to the film.
The rest was the result of CG imagery and 1/8 scale miniatures, and while it might not be as seamless as modern effects work, there's nothing quite like an expensive scale model blowing up. Now, Mission Impossible was a record-breaking hit, inspiring tons of pop culture parodies and jokes about how no one could understand the plot.
I want you to explain to me the plot of Mission Impossible. I want you to kick the wall 3 times. Take it.
And for Tom Cruise, it was time to graduate from the School of Hard Knocks and take the franchise in a bold new direction. Believe it or not, kids, Oakley sunglasses once represented more than just the profile picture next to the worst social media post you've ever seen. In the year 2000, they represented rebellion, courage, the determination of one shaggy-haired hunk in a black tank top clinging to a 2,000-foot cliff with no safety net. Mission Impossible 2 is Cruise on the cusp of transition. He has left behind the young actor who moved us in low-key dramas like Rain Man and The Color of Money and is ascending into action godhood. Now, Cruise was guided through this apotheosis by hard-boiled Hong Kong legend John Woo, the director known for his trademark heroic bloodshed, balletic, stylized, slow-motion symphonies of death.
I have a pretty good instinct about action.
Woo is responsible for some of the most glorious on-screen carnage ever committed to film, but even he was terrified at some of the stunts Cruise had dreamed up. Case in point, the opening scene. What better way to say, "Screw you, Dad, this is a Mission Impossible for the new millennium," than to open with Ethan Hunt doing some badass rock climbing while barely breaking a sweat. This wasn't Ethan Hunt risking life and limb to save the world from a new bioweapon or rogue AI. The incredibly dangerous and grueling climb was basically just to let the audience know this is a cool dude, showing, not telling, that Hunt, and by extension Cruise, are absolute lunatics.
I've never had a problem with heights. As a kid, anytime I get to the edge, I want to jump off. I don't know what it is. It's subconscious. I don't want to kill myself. I want to fly.
While most of MI2 was filmed in Australia, the crew huffed it to Utah's Dead Horse Point for the opening. Freezing temperatures and gale force winds almost forced a change of plans, but soon Cruise found himself clinging to a cliffside 2,000 feet in the air, a tiny speck of a man attempting to surmount nature itself.
In the mountain climbing storyboards, the opening shot is to establish where we are, and the camera pushes in on the cliff and you see this little speck, which turns out to be Tom Cruise. And so you see how vast it is, how big, how tall, and there's Tom in the middle of a little speck in the middle of this cliff. The storyboards then show a precarious moment where Tom slips, the rock breaks free, and he slides, almost falls off the cliff, and then he grabs on with one hand. He's hanging by one arm for a little while, and then he eventually swings around so that he's facing outward. And that's we call it the Iron Cross because his arms were straight out in a cross position.
The Iron Cross maneuver was extremely painful for Cruise to pull off, but it was crucial to John Woo's vision. One of his visual signatures involves showing the protagonist with arms outstretched in a Christ-like position. Cruise kept climbing. For 5 days of shooting, he maneuvered up, down, and around the dizzying cliffside. In the film, it looks like he's totally free solo, but Cruise was actually tethered to a cable throughout the climb that was later digitally erased thanks to some movie magic. That only relieved some of the danger and didn't stop John Woo from being scared out of his mind the entire time, especially when Hunt leaps down 15 feet to a lower outcropping of rocks.
The shot really scared me, so I was sweating and I got panic. The shot was so critical. We had 5 cameras on the top of the cliff, and we also had a helicopter camera. And from the helicopter, I need a real close to Tom. So the helicopter very close to Tom, and the blade, you can see the blade on the helicopter. It's very close to Tom's head. You know, just like I couldn't bear to watch the monitor. So I was shaking and close my eye, keep praying, God, please, keep him safe and help him, kind of thing.
Even with a broken foot, Cruise insisted on retaking the leap 7 times until they finally got it right.
He liked to do something impossible,
Yeah, I can't say enough things about how impressed I was at his willingness to do this, because it hurts. It hurts. You're jumping down 15 feet on a rock in these little shoes, and it's beating up the bottom of your feet, and he does it over and over and over again until he gets the shot perfect.
I felt very confident with the team we had, and I felt confident that I could do it. That was the most fun that I've had, probably on the entire picture, and I had a lot of fun making this movie.
In the end, there's only one shot in the entire sequence that required a stunt double, when Ethan Hunt slips from a rocky overhang, and honestly, given how he's evolved as a daredevil, I bet that still keeps Cruise up at night. If there's one word that can describe the style of John Woo, it would be extra. Take the first encounter between Hunt and love interest / plot device Thandiwe Newton, a professional thief who happens to be the villain's ex-girlfriend. It could have been a standard meet cute at a diner or fancy ball, but Woo decided to up the adrenaline by having their conversation take place during a wildly irresponsible high-speed car chase.
There was a scene that Tom tried to convince her to work together, and I just feel it's pretty boring, So I suggest using a car chase instead of talking in the room, that thing. I think the car chase will show a lot more of energy and more of life and more romantic.
Tom and Thandiwe's hot pursuit climaxes in a stunt where the cars are literally conjoined together in an extremely unsubtle metaphor, spinning out of control towards the edge of a cliff.
The end spin part, we had to build a track in the road, because to get 2 cars to connect and spin like that all the way up to the edge of a cliff is not really possible with 2 real cars. So we had 2 cars that were mounted to a turntable, and a track, a 200-yard track was buried underneath the road, and these cars would actually spin right up to the edge of the cliffs.
I mean, I remember thinking, what if here we are on this rig being thrown, hurtling to the edge of the cliff? Anything could go wrong, and you just had to put your trust in the team.
Thandiwe's first experience with stunt performing saw her dangling 100 feet from the ground, but she handled it like a champ. And as for Cruise, his next feat was something old hat for him. In a callback to the first film, he would once again descend upon a target while hanging from a cable, only this time he'd be dropping from a helicopter in midair. Well, kind of. The part where he leans out of the helicopter in the sky was very real, but again, in contrast to later Mission Impossible movies, Ethan Hunt's infiltration of Biosite Pharmaceuticals was filmed in a studio with a replica chopper and green screen substituting for the corporate HQ.
When we got to the actual jump, it's actually on a stage with green screen. Well, we did it 2 places. There was a green screen background in which they put the background on, and then there was also a shaft which we built. Tom would do this decelerator down in through the shaft.
But just because there are safety measures in place doesn't mean a stunt is inherently safe. Cruise still had to free fall down an extremely tall shaft and stop himself within inches of the camera.
You would never get an actor to do that kind of stunt, but Tom was very insistent that he do all of his own stunts. He's probably done more decelerators than 99% of the stuntmen out there.
It's too fast, too quick. The ride's over too fast.
It's a very risky and dangerous stunt.
The actual stunt is in the fate of the riggers and the stunt coordinator and the cables and the deceleration system. So the hardest part is really maintaining the body position over and over again for every take that he does, and not breaking character when you're stopping 6 inches above a camera.
He did it, I think, probably 30, 40 times, head first, stopping a foot above the ground.
And he jumped like Peter Pan.
He's falling at whatever free fall speed in that time is. I mean, it's 32 feet per second. That's what he's falling. It's full speed. Everything's very precise, but still, it's still dangerous.
Now, in typical IMF fashion, the biosite mission is a failure, meaning Ethan needs to beat a hasty retreat from the scene. To do so, he blasts a hole in a concrete wall and leaps out the side of a skyscraper. Once again, this was all green screen, but it was a really high green screen.
We ended up shooting the sequence on stage again. There's a platform that's 65 feet off the air with the set piece on it. He actually runs, jumps out the hole, free falls in the skydive position, and he stops about 5 feet off the ground where there's green screen all around so they can put the city in later.
I tried to make it a little more romantic. When Tom did the jump, I was using all in slow motion. When he jumped out of the hole, it feels so romantic and sad.
And we also did a shot where we hung him on a cable and we ratcheted him, it's called. We opened the parachute on his back and pulled him up. Now I know Tom is a skydiver, but again, a lot of things, considerations come down to time, money, lighting, those kind of things in why we do things this way, and camera angles, being able to get the exact shots that you want.
Speaking of exact shots that John Woo wants, we must acknowledge the iconic slow-motion dove emerging from the flames. Though, for the first time in his career, this symbol of innocence among bloodshed was created through CGI.
I love pigeons so much, and it became one of my signatures, and I couldn't help to use it again.
That was a CG bird coming through the flames.
It was too dangerous, what if the birds get burned?
The final sequence of the film involves another of Cruise's favorite adrenaline fiend pastimes, motorcycles. Now, originally, the climax was going to involve a car chase, but one conversation inspired Woo to kick things up a notch.
When I'm talking with Tom, and I find this guy is actually very charming. He had a lot of great energy. He liked everything fast. He liked a flying plane. He liked motorcycle. He liked speed. He liked everything fast. So that gave me the idea to create a motorcycle chase scene, because I thought that only the motorcycle could show the real speed.
But they didn't just create a cool motorcycle chase scene, they made one of the most batshit insane stunt sequences in history. Everything you shouldn't do on a motorcycle at high speeds, Cruise and co-star Dougray Scott did.
Of course, we tried to stop him, to do that, but he would insist that it's a very good idea. He said the audience haven't seen this kind of action before. I always got nervous. I was nervous about Tom, nervous about everything. It wasn't easy.
And things just got wilder from there. First, there was Tom's gnarly nose wheelie, where he jukes a pursuing car so hard it basically explodes.
The nose wheelie, say, where the bike does a nose wheelie, I really like that sequence a lot. It's way over the top, but it's just so visually exciting to watch. And the car slid almost under it. Several times I think he probably was under his back wheel. The bike would go up on its nose, spin around, and we could concentrate on Tom pulling his hand off the handlebar with the gun, shooting the car as it goes by and exploding. It's called a cannon roll. The principle is there's a hole that is ejected out of the base of the car, which the stuntman driving, he sets the car into a slide and then he hits a button which propels this telephone pole. It's a piece of a telephone pole out through the bottom of the car and sets the car flipping end over end.
Then there was the ski gag. How do you protect yourself from bullets when your entire body is exposed on the top of a motorcycle? Easy. You just hang off the side of it and use the bike as a moving shield.
There was a real stunt. Tom insisted to do it by himself, so he also did a real jump and slide.
We towed the motorcycle by a tow truck, which was a pretty horrendous thing to see. It was basically had a long arm that we used a tow truck arm with a cable hanging by it, and Tom has a safety cable again in case he falls. And the idea is he's able to jump off the bike, ski, and if he were to fall, he's hanging by the arm of the tow truck. It's still difficult though. He's still skiing, he's still going 50 miles an hour, and his feet are still sliding on the ground, and he's doing the whole thing.
Then there's the duel. Two highly trained secret agents facing off in a final clash atop their Triumph motorcycles. Woo envisioned it as knights jousting, warriors who put aside their guns and prepare to face death head on. In reality, it's only slightly less silly than that Simpsons episode where Homer and John Goodman start swinging their bikes around like swords, but Woo managed to make it work.
The motorcycle joust was the most complex stunt for me to set up. When John first came up with the idea, I paused for a little while because I didn't know how I was going to make it happen.
Are you guys okay?
So what we did was we built a track in the ground. This track was 300 feet long, and two motorcycles were attached to this track, and they would come towards each other. And then we had an overhead traveler that was 600 feet long that each guy would be cabled to. They had to literally pull themselves down to the motorcycle. So as you're leaping, it wants to spring you off the motorcycle. We still had the problem of, as they hit, not killing each other. So we had another cable on their backs, which was hooked to a small decelerator. It's the same idea as the big falls, except it basically takes your 50-mile-an-hour speed and slows it down to 0 in the last, I think I had 4 feet of deceleration. So the guys could ride at each other, jump at each other, and they'd stop right as they hit each other. Again, Tom did this willingly, which is, it's a fairly dangerous stunt. It's just there's so many elements.
Last up is a stunt that's somehow one of the most lo-fi stunts in the series and the most intense. After some cool choreographed kung fu, bad guy Agent Ambrose pulls out a knife and starts slashing wildly at our hero. Woo wanted the blade to nearly cut Hunt's face, but Cruise wanted to take it one step further. He came up with the brilliant idea to plunge the very real knife directly at his eyeball. It was so dangerous that Woo tried to talk him out of it.
And I came up with the idea, and Ambrose, he jump up in the air and land on Tom, and his knife almost cut his face, and also put it close to his eye. But Tom said, "Hey, how about just right into my eyes?" You know, I said, "No, Tom. It's very, very dangerous, and we have no time to shoot the special effect because we got to do the real thing." And I said, "No, I'm okay. I'm fine. You know, just use the real knife, and come into my eyes. It's more scary." I said, "That's what I want, but I didn't want you to get hurt. How about just a little closer to the eyes, not right at the center, you know, and make it a little more safe." But he was so stubborn, you know. Said, "No, this is right in the eyes."
So, with no time to rig up a special effects shot, they just had Cruise lay on the ground, eyes wide open. Then they attached the knife to a cable that was just long enough to stop a 1/4 inch in front of his piercing hazel eyes.
There was no faking that. What we did do was we had a cable attached to the end of the knife, which was hooked to an overhead bar, so the knife could only go so far.
So the stunt guy grabbed hold of the knife and was shaking, you know, and I was shaking, and it was shaking.
That was just nerve-wracking. I mean, it was a basic scenario of, okay, we put a cable on this thing, we stick it to a frame that's not going to move, but anybody else want to lay there with their eye open and let the thing stop a 1/2 inch or a 1/4 inch from their eye? No way.
Mission Impossible 2 was a massive hit, the highest grossing film of 2000. It became an icon of a cultural moment, the perfect marriage of extreme sports and leather-clad action heroes battling it out in slow motion to a pitch-perfect butt-rock soundtrack. This movie embodies Y2K, and Cruise was becoming the man of the millennium. Things would change with the third installment, where Tom's controversial antics and a mediocre film would spark a change in direction that solidified the series' mission for the next 2 decades. David Fincher was originally set to direct the third Mission Impossible feature, but he bailed after clashing with producers over creative control. Instead, they took a shot on a young TV director who would one day become synonymous with hopping on a popular franchise and shaping it to corporate's will.
Is it JJ Rapt also? And that's the end of the amazing Mr. JJ Abrams!
Apparently, Tom Cruise just really liked Alias. Cool.
I was working on Mission Impossible, and I was up at about 2 in the morning one night, and I'm gonna watch Alias. So I just started watching Alias. I was blown away by what he accomplished. His sense of timing, suspense. I thought, you know what? I want J.J. Abrams to direct the movie.
It's sincerely great that Cruise gave J.J. Abrams his first film directing gig. Say what you will about big IP blockbusters, they've been a launching pad for new talent for a while now, and J.J. proved more than game in his debut. Not everyone can go from shooting Felicity to embarking on a grueling 4-month globe-trotting production that involved huge explosions and death-defying stunts across 5 different countries. Now, Abrams hadn't quite shaken the small screen mentality at that point, and a lot of the movie feels distinctly TV-like in the direction and scene blocking. Philip Seymour Hoffman delivers an absolutely locked-in performance as franchise best villain Owen Davian, but the plot is such an afterthought that we never even learn what the film's MacGuffin actually is.
I'm gonna ask you one more time.
What's your name?
What is a rabbit's foot?
Who are you?
And who's the buyer?
You don't have any idea what the hell's going on, do you?
What is a rabbit's foot?
And worst of all, there's no big set piece that anyone really remembers. Nothing that reaches the heights of style of the first 2 films or the real-life spectacle of the later ones. Now, is that a fair criticism? Kind of. But it does a disservice to the incredible amount of real-world stunts and chases and action that JJ and Cruise pulled off. They didn't shoot this one on the volume, folks. Imagine it's day 1 of your first movie ever, and the first thing on the call sheet is a daring speedboat escape across Rome's River Tiber as the IMF celebrates their successful kidnapping.
Day 1 was incredibly surreal because suddenly we were shooting this movie, and to be shooting in Rome with Tom Cruise on this boat in the Tiber, yeah, it was nuts. I'd never directed a movie before. The crew is huge. I mean, there are more people on the crew than I'd ever certainly, met in my life.
Then you set up shop in a 300-year-old royal palace that you make up into a double of the Vatican, complete with a 50-foot fake wall for Tom Cruise to jump off of.
What we did is we built this 40-some-foot wall. It ended up actually serving 2 purposes. We shot one side of the wall for Rome. At the top of the wall, we actually shot in Rome. For the reverse, we shot in Caserta, looking toward Caserta as the Vatican. When he goes down, we went back to that first side of the wall, redressed to be the interior side.
Now, Hunt's entrance isn't as spectacular as his previous aerial endeavors, but the quick drop was still very much hazardous.
He wasn't stopping fast enough, and Tom and I were like, we gotta speed it up. They said, well, we can't really speed it up because if you speed it up too much, it'll bounce. So we're filming the last one, and he drops, and it's significantly quicker. He hit the ground. Now, I couldn't tell how hard he hit, truly an inch away, from a huge disaster. Tom, of course, just started laughing because he thought it was the greatest thing ever.
And the last thing the crew did before leaving the ornate 18th century UNESCO World Heritage Site was to blow up a sports car right in the middle of it. A $350,000 Lamborghini Gallardo, to be precise, which actor Maggie Q accidentally crashed when her high heel got stuck in the accelerator pedal during a take.
The heel was huge, got stuck in the accelerator, and she ended up hitting a car in front of her, and she was very embarrassed.
It's hard enough to rig an impressive action movie explosion without having to worry about how the shockwave will impact priceless Baroque architecture, so the crew had to be extra cautious.
The car will explode and burn, and what we did actually is the cast of the actual floor is a fiberglass, and underneath we are putting actually sand, try to protect as much as possible the place here, because it's a national monument.
Well, hopefully we'll have at least 7, possibly 9 or 10 cameras, whatever we can get for the explosion.
This is purposely the very last thing we're shooting here, because if this was the first thing, I don't think we would have been allowed to shoot anything else.
After the Vatican, filming moved to LA to shoot some brisk bread-and-butter action for the scene where Ethan rescues his captured protege. Some buildings blow up, and Tom Cruise jumps from a high place on a bungee cord.
Tom goes in there and inexplicably chooses to jump off, smash into, fight with, whatever the thing, he does all that stuff. The fact that he's also able to and oddly willing is just a gift to the filmmakers and the audience, because those scenes have a legitimacy that they would not have had we had a stuntman do it and pasted Tom's face on him or some other digital trick.
For the helicopter portion of the escape, Mission Impossible turns yet again to some excellent model work courtesy of the folks at ILM. Nothing to write home and tell the folks about, and certainly nothing touching the sheer riz of John Woo's choreography, but not bad for a freshman effort. The lack of big spectacle is balanced out by the frequency and competency of the more pedestrian action. If MI3 has a big signature scene, the ambush on Virginia's Chesapeake Bay Bridge would be a strong contender. They couldn't film on the actual bridge because it's generally not a good idea to crash cars and explode things on something thousands of vehicles use every day, so they built a replica in California and just beat the crap out of it.
I realized once I had, had the sequence finished and written and pre-visualized, we could get away with a lot of cheats in terms of not seeing the water. So we looked around and found this location in Calabasas, and they let us build this strip of road, part of the superstructure of this bridge, and let us shoot there. And Scott Chambliss, our production designer, basically created the set for us to do the entire sequence.
And it was all worth it to get the shot. You know the one. Ethan Hunt sprinting away from an exploding SUV that blasts him off to the side and straight into a parked car. It might be the highlight of the whole movie, a franchise-defining image in a film that otherwise doesn't leave a big impression.
So I know that I have to run at a full speed, and I just have to get out of my mind that anything's going to happen, at which point they pull the trigger and I get slammed in the car.
And he really hit it, and he went in there horizontally, and as I said at the time, if any stuntman on the bridge there had that shot on their resume, they'd be very, very proud of it as a stunt. It was a hit.
Oh yeah, because you feel that concussion will blow.
It's extremely crazy to imagine a big star lying in the road while a huge semi-truck barrels over him, but that's just regular Tom Cruise crazy. At this point, he's just getting warmed up.
I would much rather actually be Tom in the road than the guy driving the truck. Because can you imagine being the guy driving the truck over Tom Cruise? Because, yeah, it would be a real bummer if you ate it, in the middle of the road. But to be the guy driving that truck, that's worse.
The only other big moment in MI3 is the Shanghai building fulcrum swing, another set piece with big potential that looks great but lacks sauce, largely because it was shot in front of a studio green screen.
The idea was for Tom to run and jump and swing out here and land on this rooftop. And that's what you'll see in the film, except it will be blue screen and plates is how we'll accomplish that. And the main reason for that was there are no other buildings around. If you can see this big picture back here, the real buildings, there were no camera positions, so everything would have had to have been shot by helicopters. And it was a massive undertaking to light it.
He's still jumping from a high distance and falling really fast, but it's more or less the same way they shot these leaps of faith in MI2. I mean, I get it. It's not like they'd actually have Tom Cruise climb a massive skyscraper for real, right? So MI3 was a critical and commercial disappointment. Not a bomb, but no great shakes either. Abrams was offered the follow-up, but he passed it up for Star Trek. Honestly, a great move. And as for Cruise, he was in the midst of some personal controversy during the MI3 years. His membership in Scientology had come to the forefront thanks largely to South Park, and his damage control interview with Oprah resulted in the infamous couch jumping incident, which may be the most important leap he's ever taken in his career. It was the launching point for the renaissance of both Tom Cruise and his beloved franchise, the moment that transformed Mission Impossible from a cool movie series into the stunt spectacular of our day. So, Tom needed a new image, and Mission Impossible needed a new director. The second part was easy enough. Animation legend Brad Bird, who cut his teeth on early seasons of The Simpsons before helming masterpieces like The Iron Giant, The Incredibles, and Ratatouille, was eager to make his live-action debut.
Brad is a great storyteller. He understands what works, what doesn't work. He'll tell you how to take something good and make it great. So the most important thing I tried to do with Brad was to explain to him that he's got to find the stamina that it takes to go out and make a live-action movie.
Bang! Just like J.J. Abrams was thrown into the deep end, Bird had a Herculean task on his hands. On the page, the script for Ghost Protocol is actually one of the more low-key entries in the franchise. There's a much bigger focus on escapes, infiltration, and heists. Ethan Hunt never fires a gun once in the entire movie, and we don't even get our first explosion until 30 minutes in when a CGI version of the Kremlin blows up. In a way, it's kind of the opposite of Mission Impossible 3. What Ghost Protocol lacks in sheer quantity, it makes up for with two mesmerizing, large-scale, and extremely dangerous sequences. This was the birth of the what the hell is he gonna do next to Tom Cruise? And our first answer was climb outside the world's tallest building for real. The proposition was so ludicrous and risky that the film's insurance company refused to cover it. So Cruise fired them and found someone who would.
So immediately when Tom said, let's produce this, we started talking about locations, and coincidentally, he brought up the idea of shooting in Dubai, which was a place he had been fascinated by, particularly the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world. To say that Tom was a producer with a capital P on this movie is an understatement. I mean, just the idea of going to Dubai and shooting on the building was something that we thought we'd have to recreate the building and do it a more traditional way. And it was Tom who said, no, I'm going to go out there. We'll find a way to be able to make it happen. And he really led the charge.
I'm fortunate that I get to do exactly what my dream was, is to make movies. And I get the opportunity to climb the tallest building in the world.
Since scaling a 2,700-foot metal and glass tower in the Dubai desert is a slightly different proposition than some craggy rocks in Utah, Cruise practiced on a huge replica of the side of the building on a soundstage in Prague, where the surface was heated to 100 degrees to match the blazing temperatures he would face in the desert city.
Even before getting to Dubai, I had them build the glass wall for me. And we'd throw hot lights on it to bring the glass and the metal up to the temperature that it would be. And it was also physically getting training in the harness. And I would do speed climbs where for 30 minutes I would just climb up and down, so that I was ready when the camera was ready and that no one would be waiting for me.
Meanwhile, the rest of the crew was hard at work, making the then unfinished skyscraper into a somewhat safe place to shoot an action sequence. They took over some high-up floors and modified them into an OSHA inspector's worst nightmare.
I didn't realize what impact we would have to the building. We would have to drill into the ground, we'd have to drill into the ceilings, and we had to get permission for every hole that we drilled. And we had to start taking windows out. And these are windows that had never been taken out and aren't meant to come out.
Which windows are taken out?
Taken out the big ones.
What floor?
We got on 126.
At first, there was a big resistance about taking them out, and we said, look, if windows can go in, they can come out. If we can't do that, then we can't do the sequence.
Now, it wasn't just Tom Cruise's 5'7" frame that had to squeeze outside of the Burj.
Not only did we have to take a window out to get Tom access, we had to take a window out for the camera, and then we had to take a window out for the special effects guys. Then we had to take a window out for the stunt guys for doing the wires. So all of a sudden, we started out like, we'll take 3 or 4 windows out, and by the time we were done, I think we took 26 windows out. And once we had windows out, we had a lot of people working around it, and safety became a huge issue. So we had to create these red boxes that were taped out, and anybody who stepped inside of that tape had to have a harness and had to be tied off.
It wasn't really a question of safety and taking chances to us, which I think was one of the biggest problems in the beginning, is everybody looked at us, but we're going to be 2,000 feet in the air, and to us it's like being 2,000 feet, 5,000 feet, or 50 feet in the air, it's all the same. The end result is the same. If something happens, you're dead. There's no difference, you just have more time to think about it.
Heights, to me, I think are more terrifying than running the second floor, third floor, because it feels like, oh yeah, I could probably break my leg. But when you're that high in the air, you're like in a plane. I figured if I fell out, I can call a few people on the way down and say, hey man, I'm gonna be dead in a few minutes, but like, what are you doing? It's a long way down.
So the building was prepped, the star was trained, and the cameras were ready to roll. All that was left was to get out there and shoot one of the wildest scenes in cinematic history.
I was a professional climber for about 30 years. My job was to make Tom act and look like a real climber, which he's doing a really good job at. He listens well and understands everything. That's very impressive, actually, for an actor to do this. I don't know if there's an actor out there that can even hold his lunch bucket as far as nerves.
The Burj was very complicated.
Radio check, I got you, Greg, thank you.
You're not only talking to the stunt guy's talking to Tom. I'm talking to the helicopter pilots. Tom's in these harnesses that are uncomfortable. There's all these limitations.
One of those limitations would become another trademark of the Mission Impossible series. For the first time, the action would be captured on IMAX cameras. The resulting clarity and scope would change the game for blockbuster movies, but they weren't easy to work with 2,000 feet in the air.
The helicopters can only stay in the air about half an hour. The IMAX cameras can't shoot long. They burn through a lot of film really fast. If you have to reload the camera, they have to take it back to the helicopter base. Everybody's trying to line this stuff up, and poor Tom is on the outside of this tallest building in the world, hanging on, waiting for everything to get in position.
Now, before we go any further, it's worth clarifying that Cruise wasn't out there on his own with just a pair of glitchy gecko gloves between him and the Almighty. Special cables the size of piano wire were attached to various points of the building and later erased with CGI. Tom was no doubt grateful for its presence, but the rigging itself was extremely uncomfortable, especially when it came time for his 4-story freefall.
I had to figure out, how do I fly off that building? And you have to figure it out very quickly, because you can't stay up in that building in the gear that I was wearing for very long, because you're being cut off in 2 main arteries across your harness and your legs are numb. I had to do it very quickly. I had to go, just decide, I just had to get it. You had to get it, you had to get it, you had to get it.
How was that? Oh, that was fun.
We got some great, amazing shots, and the first night I was sleeping and it was like 4 in the morning. Suddenly my eyes just snapped open and I realized the star of our movie is like swinging around on the outside of the tallest building in the world, held on by like a tiny wire. And I just kind of went, ugh!
From terrifying 30-foot drops to sprinting horizontally across the building's surface, the 4-day shoot at the Burj Khalifa took a lot of planning, coordination, and guts to pull off. And its success is a testament to the thrilling, tangible value of practical stunt work.
The reflections in the glass have moving things in them, like cars and stuff like that, and then they're actually reacting to the pressure of Tom's hands. And it's the kind of detail that you would never think to get in effects. And if you did do it, it would be tremendously expensive.
Now, the Burj climb gets all the love when it comes to Ghost Protocol, and for good reason. But honestly, the final fight at the Mumbai parking garage is another seriously impressive piece of work, especially when you realize that there's no giant automatic car silo there. It was based on a real structure built by Volkswagen, basically a glass vending machine that can hold up to 400 automobiles, but it was up to the crew in Vancouver to build this mechanical monstrosity themselves. Their first problem was finding a place to fit it.
Originally, we started building it at the studio, and the stage wasn't big enough, so we moved to a shipping manufacturing facility where they actually used to build ships. We took over this massive hangar. That set doesn't look that big in there because that hangar's enormous, but it's huge. Our set was 65 feet tall. Well, that's like a 7-story building.
The set took 6 months to build, weighed 35,000 pounds, and featured 2 23-foot paddles that each weighed over 3 tons. It held 70 cars, 18 on each level, and lest you think it was just a static replica, we are pleased to inform you that the entire structure was fully operational.
So it was a very complex automated parking structure with hydraulic paddles, all computerized.
Special effects, we work with construction. They built the outside of it and we built the moving parts. The paddles can hold 7,500 pounds each. Either paddle can move at the same time, 180 degrees.
And while all this was going on, another unit in the same building was shooting inserts and smaller stunts.
10 years from now, I think I'll remember building this car park structure and filming on this whole thing was quite a big deal.
Okay,
So this is pretty cool because we have one giant sound stage and we have the car drop going on up here where Ethan's car drops down a roller coaster. And we have second unit doing inserts. And then over here is the car park. So it's all of this is going on in one giant set, which is really kind of cool, kind of old-fashioned movie-making wonderfulness.
All right, quiet, ready, roll on about, roll sound.
You're shooting double the footage in the same amount of time. You have a massive amount of people working on main unit shooting this enormous set. And right next door you have a bit smaller group shooting stunts and complicated rigs that take time that you don't want your main unit to shoot.
It was a lot to keep track of, but Bird's animation expertise was a big help for this sequence, since he was able to plan out the precision action through animatics in his trademark dynamic style.
Previs means pre-visualization. It's a step quite beyond storyboarding.
3, 2, 1, go!
And essentially what you're doing is you're using computer graphics to build your film. You can actually run your camera through the structure in the same way you would have said. You're going to move your characters around as if you're moving them in space.
And jump.
And what it does is it makes sure that it's actually going to work.
Every mechanical motion had to be expertly programmed and every step meticulously rehearsed to avoid the actors being cut in half by the heavy paddles, which only had a ½ inch of clearance from the floor. Naturally, Cruise and co-star Michael Nyqvist were in every shot, dangling from the ceiling by digitally erased cables that created the illusion of the most dangerous Super Mario level that ever existed.
No! No!
This was the most ambitious Mission Impossible I've ever done. I think it was fully realized with Brad Bird. I think it went even beyond the ideas that I was exploring. Really, I loved it. I loved every minute of it.
Ghost Protocol was a big hit, setting a franchise box office record that wouldn't be beaten until Fallout 7 years later. Mission Impossible was back in a big way, and so was Tom Cruise. The path moving forward was clear. Big spectacle, dangerous stunts, and a star with seemingly no sense of self-preservation, risking his life in 18K IMAX resolution.
Do you have your seatbelt on? Will you asking me that now?
We have officially entered the modern era of Mission Impossible, and we have one man to thank, Christopher McQuarrie. After hopping on Ghost Protocol to do some last-minute rewrites, he and Cruise hit it off and began an enduring and extremely profitable working relationship. He co-wrote the awesome Edge of Tomorrow and wrote and directed Jack Reacher, not to be confused with the Amazon Prime series that more accurately cast a huge guy in the titular role. Alan Ritchson might have 6 inches in height and about 100 pounds on Tom Cruise, but you know what? Let's see him hang out of a plane. In the wake of Ghost Protocol's success, Brad Bird took his fabled Hollywood blank check and elected to make Tomorrowland. In a much better career move, McQuarrie hopped on to helm the next Mission Impossible movie, and he's been more or less co-running the franchise with Cruise ever since. and together they've established the formula we've all come to expect. One giant, impossible stunt designed to showcase Cruise's courage, a ton of awesome practical action wrapped around what could generously be called a plot, and tons of pressers and junkets designed to gas up Tom so he'll do something even crazier the next time around.
Tom.
Rogue Nation doesn't waste any time. Before barely 3 minutes has passed, including the opening logos, Ethan Hunt is leaping onto the wing of an A400 Airbus, hoping to intercept an illicit shipment of deadly nerve gas.
We knew we needed some sort of a stunt, some sort of a spectacle. It's become a rite of passage for a Mission Impossible film. We had a big legacy to live up to. Jim Bissell, the production designer, came to me with this model of this plane, said, "What would you do with this?" And I turned to Tom and I said, half joking, "What if you were on the outside of that thing when it took off?"
You know, you think about stuff like that as a kid. What would it be like out on that wing? When McHugh said, "Look, what about hanging off the side of an A400?" I said, "All right, yeah, let's do it."
Cruise didn't need any convincing, but the higher-ups in production had their doubts.
It became this question of how do you not just get the insurance, which I still don't know how he does that, but how much do you want to really risk the life of this person? Because it's very easy for all of us, you know, who are wearing sweaters, to say, okay, Tom Cruise is going to go hold on to the side of an airplane when it takes off. And it's nothing to be the person who's doing it.
Not to mention the people who actually made the airplane.
Airbus did not know for certain that the plane could structurally deal with what we were considering.
We basically looked at you like you were crazy, to be honest. So we had to convince them. So from my side, it was a lot of drawings and engineering and a lot of talks and letting them trust me.
So on a cold winter's day at an RAF airfield in England, Cruise would put their trust to the test. They had just 48 hours to nail the shot.
I remember I couldn't sleep the night before. And I was thinking, okay, kind of just going through my mind, did we check everything out? We wanted that shot where, as it's on its climb, you see the Earth move away from you at a very high speed. So his angle of attack had to be very steep.
There was an incredibly precise margin of error in the throttle. The plane had to be going fast enough to stay airborne, but it couldn't be going so fast that Tom simply would be torn off regardless of what safety measures we had.
But the real danger wasn't Tom falling 5,000 feet to a grisly death, since he was once again safely, and we say that with the biggest quotation marks possible, strapped to the plane with a good old digitally erasable cable. The crew was far more worried about things hitting Tom, not Tom hitting the ground.
The risk of any debris that was on the airfield.
Any particle that could hit me, even a small little rock.
If it was sucked into the propeller and hit Tom, it would be traveling at the speed of a bullet.
If that goes into my eye, it's going to go through my eye.
So what do? You can't have your big action hero who has walked through flames and scaled the world's tallest building, squeezing his eyes shut, and you're not going to put Tom Cruise in a pair of dorky goggles. We're buying a ticket to see Tom Cruise put his life on the line, and we demand to see every pore on his face. So instead, Cruise wore custom-made contacts that covered his entire eyeballs.
We had scleral lenses fitted for my eyes. I tested those because we were also worried, as the wind is blowing, if it could fold the lens over on itself, which would have been very uncomfortable and not so safe.
One small problem is that they rendered Cruise effectively blind.
And I couldn't see when I had the lenses in. They protected my eyes, but it cost me my eyesight.
And maybe that's for the best, because if there was, say, a bird barreling towards him, there was pretty much nothing he could do but hope for the best.
We simply could not control the variable of birds flying in the path of that airplane. And if a bird hit Tom at that speed on any part of his body, that would have been the end.
If I see a bird, I'm going to press up against the side of the airplane.
There were concerns about the engine's exhaust potentially poisoning the star, frigid temperatures without any thermal protection, and a whole host of other problems without any solution better than, screw it, we just got to do it.
And then came the day. I was like, okay, this is really going to happen.
I said, okay. And I walked back behind the engines and back in front of the engines and got on the plane and sat down and realized we have no idea what's really going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen next. And with that, the plane took off.
Now, not only did Cruise have to not die on top of everything else, as he was blindly flailing around a flying bus nearly a mile above ground, the actor still had to hit his lines. Now, somehow, everything went off without a hitch. The plane landed, Cruise's eyeballs were intact, and one of the most legendary feats in film history was in the can, right?
And I kind of thought that was a one take and he was going to do it once and then walk away.
I just said to the camera, I went like this, and I said, let's go again, I'm ready.
He did it 8 times.
Every time it was like, holy shit.
Seems like he enjoyed it.
For most actors, getting slapped around by a fuselage in midair would probably be enough for one movie. You can imagine a newer generation of stars accustomed to Unreal Engine sets and nanotech CG costumes being like, that's a wrap on stunts for me. But this was just a warm-up for Tom Cruise. Ethan is back on the ground and chatting up girls at the record store with 2 whole hours of movie left. We're just getting our feet wet. The sequence inside the turbine, an underwater set piece designed as an homage to the Langley vault break-in from MI1, might be even more breathtaking than dangling from a real plane as it plunges through the sky.
Imagine Mission Impossible 1, where Ethan is hanging by a thread. Now remove the thread and don't allow him to breathe.
We realized very quickly that Tom was going to have to be holding his breath for a very long time. Further compounding that was he would be moving. So we baked that into the sequence. We made that the central threat, that physical activity underwater equals death.
I knew that I had in front of me one of the most complex, if not the most complex underwater sequence I've ever been involved with in my career.
Jumping 120 feet into a gaping computer-animated maw to start the sequence was second nature to Cruise at this point, but depriving himself of oxygen for 3 minutes was gonna take some practice. Deep sea diver Kirk Crack was enlisted to train Tom in special ops techniques and maintain a chill mindset.
Taking Tom and Rebecca through a breath hold special operations program. It's a program that I've designed for militaries. And what we're really trying to do is we're developing their ability to hold their breath under extreme conditions.
You have to overtrain for a sequence. We were doing up to 6.5-minute breath holds.
We started breath hold.
Tom's very comfortable underwater, and he likes to challenge the crew by staying under longer than he should on a breath hold and get us all worried.
Let's not freak people out too much. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 3. Tom and Rebecca as students were amazing. It was a pretty great experience to see them actually grow and get better all the time.
Just keep a very calm manner on the set, and we make it like this sort of zen state which keeps everyone calm and all their heart rates down, so we can go for the longest possible take.
Tom Cruise, in a David Blainian feat of body discipline and borderline insanity, learned to hold his breath for 6 minutes. That is not something our species really does, and Cruise pulled it off while still hitting his marks and holding for lighting.
It was scary and impressive just as a bystander, because he might have done a 1.5 minute long take, but what you really had to appreciate is that he has to hold his breath, wait for everyone to get into position, wait for all the bubbles to clear, wait for the cameras to roll. Then he does a long take. And then he has to wait for the divers to come back and give him air.
All of this for a lengthy one shot that we never see in the final film. There are tons of cuts throughout the tourist scene, which kind of ruins the whole point of learning to hold your breath for 6 minutes, but we'll always have the featurettes.
I have to say, it was really fascinating. I learned a lot about my body and how it works.
Not even literally dying can slow Ethan Hunt down. He gets zapped back to life and immediately gets sucked up in one of the series' best chases.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Are you okay to drive? I mean, a minute ago you were dead. What are you talking about?
It's not as fancy as the main event set pieces, but there's an awesome undercard of amazing stunt and vehicle work that cannot be ignored.
The chase had evolved from the work that Tom and I did on Jack Reacher. We learned a lot shooting that car chase and wanted to take it to the next level. And of course, the next level for Tom was to do it on a motorcycle and to find a way to shoot Tom riding without a helmet at incredibly high speed.
Custom camera rigs and a frankly irresponsible lack of head protection give us a clear view of Cruise blasting through Morocco streets at speed, weaving through mostly digital traffic. The car work is extremely cool, where Hunt rockets his car down endless stairs and uses his vehicle as a weapon to smash his pursuers.
In order for us to shoot that sequence on the Rabat steps, we first had to cover the steps with special ramps that we had to go in and install and then remove digitally. Otherwise, we would have lost a BMW every time we went down those stairs. And then, of course, we had all those bikes going down the stairs as well, and we needed expert motorcycle riders.
So we had the two bikers ride down, free riding, with Tom doing the slide himself. We've made the special wall over here, is all foam. And then the wall itself actually hinges. The whole wall's on a hinge system, so it's got give that it moves. And if he actually does get stuck against it, it's got some movement as well.
Cool stuff, solid work, but what really makes the chase memorable is Benji and Luther's reaction to Ethan's afterlife-induced loopiness.
It is funny. There's no way you can not laugh at these guys bouncing around like Muppets in the car, banging their heads, and so we've had fun with that, with the horn beeping every time they bang their head on the hook, and it just makes that whole scene.
Mission Impossible isn't afraid of comedy, but it rarely mixes well with the action. This is a different kind of scene that could have been extremely annoying if it wasn't for the awesome real-life carnage that went into it.
And we talk about the A400 as a dangerous stunt. We talk about the underwater sequence as a very dangerous stunt. The driving in that sequence was incredibly precise and incredibly difficult.
It was fun. It was extreme. It was high velocity the entire time, and we loved it. We had a blast.
The shoot demanded expertise, and Cruise had done a lot of stunt driving by this point, but he would never turn down a chance for self-improvement.
I had a little meeting with Tom before the film, and I said, because of the nature of the work we have on this, we have to take you back to basics, and I'd like to reteach you so that the end result you come out 100% better than you ever were. He really embraced that. Every week we did a different track around Britain, and we went and trained him with drifting and all the driving stuff in the cars, and he really went to another level.
I have to say, the way Wade set the car up and set the motorcycle up and the kind of training that we did, it was able to just take it to a whole new level.
In the course of one movie, this man learned to be an S-tier stunt driver, demolished his body's need for oxygen, and conquered his fear of heights. Well, he may have already had that last part down, but the point is this: Tom Cruise was leveling up. He was grinding extreme XP and maxing every skill in preparation for the most challenging boss of his career. Is Fallout peak Mission Impossible? It's got crazy stunts, a cool mystery, and a jacked up Henry Cavill at the height of his power, rocking the mustache heard round the world. It's a hard question to answer with the future of the franchise still open-ended, but this movie has a lot going for it. McQuarrie returns as a director in a series first, signaling the end of the fresh talent spinning their take on Mission Impossible era. Filming began in 2017 with a bare-bones script just 33 pages long, a clear signal that the story was built to serve the action and not the other way around. The series had officially locked in its identity as a vehicle for Chris and Tom to push the limits of on-screen spectacle, and it doesn't get more spectacular than a high-altitude, low-open leap from 25,000 feet in the air.
Tom will be the first actor to do a halo jump on camera.
Halo jump, this high altitude, low open.
Military jump out 25,000 feet.
Opening a chute below 2,000 feet.
And sneak into a foreign country without being detected. That's the idea of Halo.
Let's back up for a second. 25,000 feet is nearly 5 miles above the ground. The human body was not meant to exist in those conditions.
There's a lot of risks in going to 25,000 feet.
The audience can tell when something's been cheated, so it's important to be doing it all for real.
There's dangers of hypoxia and the bends.
You start losing your mind, but you don't realize it.
You can't just get on the plane and go. You have to spend 20 minutes on the ground breathing pure oxygen so that you don't get decompression sickness.
Now, Ethan Hunt is obviously not a fan of helmets, but even he couldn't survive a halo jump without oxygen. But since rule number 1 is that Tom Cruise's face needs to be visible on screen, the crew had to come up with an innovative new helmet from scratch.
We had to develop a special helmet that is both a prop and a life-saving device.
Now, they couldn't just throw Cruise out of a C-17 and hope for the best, so before any cameras started rolling, they embarked on a wild training regiment. They built one of the world's largest wind tunnels to practice aerial choreography. Then, they spent the next 4 weeks in the UAE, skydiving up to 8 times a day to iron out all the kinks. They chose that location because it was literally the only country in the world that would legally allow them to do something so insane.
These skydivers that I was diving with also, they all had thousands and thousands of jumps. I didn't. And it's something that none of us took for granted. And every jump I was looking to, how do I improve my skill? What do I do? How can I do it better?
No one thought it would require over 100 jumps to get the scene.
We needed the UAE. Had they not stepped in, we would not have been able to accomplish the sequence.
We've been doing 5 jumps a day out of the Twin Otter. In the afternoons, we'll do 3 C-17 jumps, and it's challenging.
In the final film, the scene is so striking in large part because it was filmed at sunset during the golden hour, a tiny window of perfect lighting that's any cinematographer's dream.
The light has to be perfect. We only get 1 shot a day.
We have to shoot it as close to sunset as we can, so we have exactly 3 minutes every day to get the shot.
Not only did Cruise have to exit a plane flying over 100 miles an hour, he had to stay close enough to the camera operator to stay in focus. A camera operator who, by the way, had to perform the exact same choreography for probably way less money and with a 20-pound IMAX camera strapped to his head.
And then I have to fly down and be within 3 feet of the lens, because he's pulling focus, which is something that's never been done before in the air, because he's using a film camera. He's having to pull focus while he's also skydiving. And I'm skydiving down to him, and I have to be within 3 feet of him. 3 feet, not 2.5, not 3.5. It has to be 3 feet because of the depth of field, because of the light and the lens that we were using.
You're talking about Tom jumping out of a plane that's traveling at 165 miles an hour. Falling at 200 miles an hour, and he's to position himself so that he lands exactly 3 feet away from the camera with 20,000 feet beneath him. The risk of a mid-air collision we were really concerned about.
There's always a ticking clock in filming a movie, but it's not usually the Earth flying up towards you.
After a more or less successful landing on the Grand Palais in Paris, Cruise and Cavill hunt for the elusive John Lark and find themselves in one of the best fight scenes in the series. It almost seems pedestrian in comparison to Mission Impossible's more high-octane stunts, but come on, we're not going to talk about Fallout without getting into the badass bathroom brawl.
I knew I wanted this this very pure and very clean environment, and a sense that there was no escape. What I described to the production designer was, I want to feel like a cockroach on the kitchen floor when you walk into this bathroom. All of that created a sense of vulnerability and a sense of exposure in a place that is as private as that.
Cavill, Cruise, and decoy John Lark, Liang Yang, each developed their own unique fighting style that reflected their characters.
The stunt team, they're very particular about creating unique fighting styles for each character and fusing each fighting style with character. Liang Yang, who is the other actor in the scene, has his own fighting style. He's a wushu expert. The idea that we developed very early on was comparing Ethan and Walker as a scalpel and a hammer. That then determined what Henry's fighting style was, and you see that very much within that sequence.
The scene isn't that long, but the amount of choreography and sheer destruction of the bathroom set resulted in a grueling 4-week shoot that left the actors' bodies, if not their egos, battered and bruised.
When you look at that scene, what makes that scene work is how hard the actors are working in it.
Kicking ass and getting your ass kicked is hard, both ways.
All of us, none of us walked away from that scene going, we were all limping. Not one of us would ever admit it.
It was wild, and it took a very long time to shoot, a very long time, because we kept on going back and readjusting stuff, and then going back again and readjusting more stuff. That big set piece where I throw Liang through the bathroom. If I got it one step wrong, I had to then pause halfway through and hold him where he was, so it doesn't end up being 40-minute to 2-hour reset because I messed it up. So a lot of pressure to get it right.
Thankfully, there was still some room for improv amid all the tight choreography. That's how we got an image so iconic it rivals Ethan dangling from the ceiling or throwing his exploding Oakleys at the camera. Henry Cavill's fist reload.
It was just something that kind of came to me, kind of happened. August Walker he's a tough guy, and he's not used to losing fights. And so he's enormously frustrated at that stage. And so that's his, right, gloves are off. I'm not gonna try and protect you now. I'm just gonna beat the living daylights out of you.
How can a movie possibly top a business casual Cavill shooting his cups to pop a fresh mag in his biceps? It's a high bar to clear, but Fallout manages to up the intensity with a high-speed chase shot on location in Paris.
I love movies. I grew up watching so many great films that were made in Paris. To be able to go there to celebrate a city of cinema, it's very rewarding.
We wanted to do something that really showcased the city. We are under the city, in the city, over the city. You see every possible corner of Paris in this chase.
Paris is an old, old city. Horses were barely domesticated when humans started living there, and the narrow cobblestone streets were in no way designed for dozens of vehicles to barrel through.
We wanted to do things that hadn't been done in Paris before.
The sequence is incredibly dangerous.
Speeding through Paris at 100 miles an hour with Tom Cruise at the wheel.
Only Tom Cruise can do that.
First, Tom wedges a truck into a tiny alley. Then, he hops on a motorcycle and speeds off, sans helmet.
Motorcycle chase in Paris was nerve-wracking for many reasons, the main one being that Tom was riding a motorbike on the streets without a helmet.
I spent a lot of time training on the motorcycles. You know, they're very challenging.
A lot of the streets in Paris are cobblestones, which are much more slippery. It's harder to control the bike.
One slip, he falls, and we have a huge problem.
It only takes one knock on your head and it can be a fatal accident. There's only so much protection and help you can give.
Paris is a tough place to film in for a lot of reasons. It's a tall order just to get permission to shoot anything in the City of Lights, let alone an unprecedented wrong-way traffic stunt at the Arc de Triomphe.
We shut down the Arc de Triomphe, which has never been done before. They actually said no a whole bunch of times.
In the film industry, we don't take the first, second, or third no.
And we kept kind of asking, and finally we said, well, what if we just asked for an hour?
There was only one day in the spring they were closing the Arc de Triomphe.
We took it.
The City of Paris gave us control of the Arc de Triomphe from 6 in the morning until 8 in the morning. By the time the sun came up, that gave us about an hour to do all of the shooting that we had.
1 hour to corral 20 police cars, 60 civilian vehicles, and a buttload of motorcycles into an intricate dance across 4 lanes of traffic in front of a French landmark, ending in a nasty crash. It's a logistical nightmare that few could pull off except for the Mission Impossible crew.
Pretty convinced if this crew needed to put somebody on the moon, they could do it.
And Cruise still wasn't done, because less than 5 minutes later, Hunt and the gang are back on the road in a beautiful, hand-built BMW M5 that they proceed to beat the heck out of.
He's a very, very good driver, Tom. I remember asking Wade Eastwood, our stunt coordinator, who was going to do the driving. Wade said, oh, Tom's the best driver I have.
Tom tortured the M5.
It was like going down stairs backwards in a car and spinning it round. I mean, there's no like rigs or anything, they just do it.
We drove down a very tight road on cobbles, turned the car around and you drove it straight off a 5-foot drop off. I mean, there aren't many stunt people in the world that are capable of doing that.
The thing just didn't break. We smashed it, we hit it, we jumped curves in it, we drifted it, I mean, it was indestructible.
At this point in the video, we think we've pretty firmly established that Cruise knows his way around a car or motorcycle. He's also pretty handy with a plane, having earned his pilot's license in 1994. There was really only one vehicle left that Tom hadn't mastered yet.
He came to me and he said, we're going to go to Airbus and we're going to learn how to fly a helicopter and be a 2,000-hour pilot in a very short period of time.
It takes something like 3 months of 8-hour days just to become a novice helicopter pilot. Tom needed to work round the clock to reach the level of skill this sequence needs.
Yeah, we started Tom's training almost 2 years ago, learning to fly helicopters. We got him his license, and then he spent the next year or so practicing.
Everyone was very concerned about Tom when he first came here.
There was a lot of doubt on can Tom pull this off? Can he learn how to fly a helicopter?
We're not talking about a quick blades ride from the airport either. This is some of the most dangerous flying possible in the most dangerous aircraft that exists, made even more risky by the fact that, you guessed it, they had to rig away to make sure the audience knew it was Tom Cruise in the cockpit.
Tom, he's performing 3 jobs. He's the pilot, he's the camera operator, and he's acting.
Most aerial chases you'll see from a helicopter, we don't usually turn the cameras in.
Really, we need to develop a whole new program, whole new lens package and mounts.
Well, in the 15 years that I've been building camera mounts, we always try to get the camera mounts as close to the aircraft as possible because the tighter in you get, the more stable they are. But now we're seeking to put them way out in space, and that's been a challenge.
We had to go experimental mode on this. Everything is way beyond what you could get certification on a normal, everyday commercial flying machine.
We have to imagine with all these components, with the minimum of vibration, really safe for filming. I think it's the most important challenge.
There was so much that could go wrong that pretty much everyone involved with the shoot had a different fear. Some were worried about the camera rigs shaking the aircraft apart. McQuarrie was deeply concerned about air traffic.
The most dangerous part of the aerial sequence is really that there's more than one helicopter in the air.
You had the 2 hero helicopters, Tom's helicopter and Henry's. My helicopter, which was following them. A separate camera helicopter, which was filming the 2 hero helicopters from the outside, air to air. And you had a medevac helicopter that was flying above all of those helicopters in case anything went wrong.
Once all the helicopters are floating in the air, it becomes a little harder to organize.
We have 13 helicopters in the production. The ones on camera doing aerobatics just a few feet from each other. It's pretty wild.
Then there was the unpredictable weather and the fact that the choppers would be flying through gorges and brushing against mountains.
Wow, this is fantastic.
We're flying in the mountains. It's some of the most dangerous conditions to fly in, and you have to really know what you're doing because the mountains can kill you.
I was inches away from sides of cliffs and right on the tail of Henry's helicopter.
He got within a rotor's length of my rotor. So all it takes is one mistake like that when you're too close and the helicopters will hit each other.
The diciest move was no doubt when Cruise plunges his chopper in a 360 corkscrew death spiral straight toward terra firma.
Tom was determined to learn this aerobatic maneuver, which was a corkscrew turn.
And do those spins at very low G and be able to pull out at very low level.
Which is basically, it's an alpine descent. The risk of that is you can overspeed the rotor head and the blades. And if they overspeed for too long, they just literally pop off, and then you're just a rock that drops.
There was a lot of resistance to me doing this particular stunt, the extreme nature of the flying. I did a lot of preparation, and every step of the way I made sure that I just didn't come in going, oh, it's me, I can do this. I was like, we're all professionals here, and you have a right to see my ability.
The helicopter chase went off without a hitch. In fact, the only really scary moment took place before, during the equally insane stunt where Tom is hanging from an ascending chopper, falls down, and barely catches himself on a hanging payload.
As Tom was shooting the drop for the first time, Rebecca and I were standing on the set. You could see Tom dangling from this helicopter, and Rebecca walked up to me and said, "What is he doing?"
It is so goddamn high, and then you see this tiny little black dot.
And about a second later, Tom fell.
What the hell is he doing?
I find it best not to look.
And I heard myself scream. I actually thought he fell.
There was an audible gasp from the crowd.
And after all that, after the chase and the drop and a big crash created with a CGI-enhanced chopper body, Cruise and Cavill still had to film one last fight in freezing, pouring weather on top of and over the edge of a giant cliff in Norway.
Hanging off the cliff was quite dangerous, but I mean, there's a lot of safety measures in place. Filming the fight on the edge of the cliff actually seemed to be the most precarious. First time I came here, I didn't want to get within 50 feet of the edge. Watching Henry and Tom go over, they've done so much extreme stuff in this movie that I don't think it really occurred to any of us that it was as scary as it looked.
So that's Fallout. It's easy to see why it ranks so high on the Mission Impossible tier list. It is a lot of movie. We're exhausted just talking about it, and it's hard to imagine how punishing actually making it must have been. But it didn't seem to bother Cruise too much, and it certainly didn't deter him on his journey to keep raising the bar in his never-ending quest to save cinema. And the movies were gonna need Tom Cruise more than ever. The obnoxious title was our first clue that something was going to be a little off with Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, hereafter DRPO. Envisioned as a two-film production a la Lord of the Rings, the destiny of DRPO was forever changed with an event that shook civilization itself.
So I'm sorry, I'm beyond your apologies. I have told you, and now I want it. And if you don't do it, you're out! We are not shutting this movie down! Is it understood? If I see it again, you're gone.
Now, Tom shouldn't have blown his stack at his crewmates mildly violating COVID procedure, but if you've stuck with us for this long, then you should realize how much timing, precaution, and personnel go into keeping Tom Cruise alive during big stunts. It's not entirely unreasonable to expect the same level of protocol for something as serious as COVID. It's the reason behind Van Halen's infamous No Brown M&Ms concert rider request. If someone disregards a small rule, who knows what big ones they might ignore. He could have been more chill about it, but Cruise stands by what he said. He felt like the whole industry was on his back, and he wasn't entirely wrong.
You're back there in Hollywood making movies right now because of us! Because they believe in us and what we're doing! I'm on the phone with every studio at night, insurance companies, producers, and they're looking at us and using us to make their movies. We are creating thousands of jobs, you
COVID cost the production dearly. They spent the next few months hopping from country to country, rehearsing and shooting as much as they could before being forced to close up shop again. The crew had to figure out pandemic-era filmmaking on the fly. It's not like they were making mumblecore at a coffee shop. This was a full-fledged Mission Impossible extravaganza with all the logistics that entails. Cruise reportedly spent $700,000 of his own money chartering 2 cruise ships to house the cast and crew in an offshore bubble while filming. This was all incredibly expensive, reportedly adding $50 million to the already huge budget. There was a lot going on, and unfortunately, it's kind of evident in the movie itself. It's time we had the talk. Digital enhancement has been a part of this series' DNA since day one, and for the most part, it's nearly flawless. Mission Impossible has erased more cables than Netflix, but this might be the first time they went just a little bit too far. The stunt work on display in DRPO is breathtaking as always, and all the more impressive for pulling it off amid a global catastrophe. But in the final film, there's a lot of CGI that just seems to be in the way. It feels like they have something to hide when in fact the opposite is true. The BTS footage is rad as hell.
This is far and away the most dangerous thing we've ever attempted.
We've been working on this for years. We're gonna shoot it in Norway, and it'll be a motorcycle jump off a cliff into a base jump. I wanted to do it since I was a little kid.
Hot off his Halo jump, Tom leaped back into aerial training, drilling and base diving for a year.
Lots of practice on stability and freefall.
Tracking with John and Miles in the air, doing lots of different positioning, like they were a two-man team in the air, coming on top of each other, below each other, backtracking, front tracking. You know, we've drilled and drilled and drilled.
They were doing 30 jumps a day.
Getting to a point where he was just a machine. I mean, over 500 skydives.
That's what we do. Over 13,000 motocross jumps.
The numbers don't lie. Just in case his biker skills weren't polished enough from Paris, Cruise put in some hours catching air on a sick motocross track.
Getting competent in the motocross, so he's comfortably jumping 70, 80-foot tabletops. Great time in the air, great positioning on the bike, landing well.
I have to get so good at this that there's just no way that I miss my marks.
Then it was off to a replica ramp built in an English quarry to get a feel for the trajectory and capture some data.
We built models of different ramps at different angles to calculate what Tom's trajectory would be. We have to be able to consistently predict where Tom is going to be in three-dimensional space.
We're gonna have a GPS chip on me.
And that recorded every single one of Tom's jumps, along with his ground speed, whether there was a headwind, whether there was a crosswind. And by doing this multiple times, we were able to get a consistent set of data.
The actual jump was filmed in Norway on the very first day of production. After the delay involving Tom's ankle, they figured it was better to get any potential death out of the way before they got too in the weeds.
You know, the only things you really have to avoid while doing a stunt like this is serious injury or death. Here we go. You're riding a motorcycle, which is pretty dangerous, on top of a ramp that's elevated off the ground, so if you come off the ramp, that's gonna be very bad. You're falling. If you don't get a clean exit from the bike and you get tangled up with it, if you don't open your parachute, you're not gonna make it.
Either we're going to continue with the film or we're not. Let's know day one.
There we go.
I want to know, let's know day one. What is going to happen? Do we all continue or is it a major rewrite?
They not only pulled off an extremely spectacular stunt, they did it over and over again.
Pretty much the biggest stunt in cinema history. Tom Cruise just rode a motorcycle off a cliff 6 times today.
The biggest stunt in cinema history is a pretty audacious shot to call, but it makes for an extremely clickable headline for your featurette video. The cliff jump is massive, no doubt, but it doesn't really come across in the movie. The problem is that humongous ramp, or rather the dubious landscape structure that ILM unconvincingly replaced it with. In the movie, the very real and awesome act of jumping a bike off a cliff is diluted by the presence of this Sonic the Hedgehog slope. Everything about the stunt is sick except for the final product. The whole spectacle just feels like it would work better as a live network TV special, ramp and all. DRPO did the best it could under the circumstances. They spent 5 weeks building a town in the Abu Dhabi desert only to be shut down for COVID, which actually kind of worked out for the best.
In a way, it did me a favor with the winds blowing all the sand in and aging the buildings beautifully in the sun. Over months, it only made the set look better.
One thing led to another, and a sandstorm became an element of it.
You mentioned the dust storm in Abu Dhabi. First thing that sprung to mind was that I had this jet engine in the back of my workshop.
3, 2, 1.
The on-location chase through Rome is seriously impressive, especially when you consider that Cruise is literally driving and drifting one-handed.
We let the city tell us the kind of chase it was going to be. Traffic in the city is notorious, and the cobblestone streets make all of the driving unpredictable. Best part is Tom and Haley, they're handcuffed together.
People are chasing us.
Yes, they are. You're driving.
Tom had to drive one-handed cuffed, for real. No cheating it.
The key is, don't crash.
Then he has to do it all in a tiny tricked out Fiat 500.
You could barely control the car. It was treacherous.
The Fiat, that was wild.
Some would even say the car is possessed. I don't think we could have made a sequence that was more difficult to shoot if I had gone out of my way to do it.
The bread and butter stunt work in DRPO holds up super well. It's the big set pieces that wind up disappointing, and not because they aren't difficult or dangerous. The train sequence that closes the film is a perfect example. In a throwback to the very first movie, Ethan Hunt and the antagonist, then John Voight, now Esai Morales, duke it out in a battle to the death on top of a moving train. Only this time, they're having a knife fight while they're blasting across the landscape on a custom-built train car going 60 miles an hour for real. What a difference 7 movies can make.
We wanted to build upon the previous films and apply all of that knowledge to something practical and real, and bring this train sequence to another level. There was not a surplus of trains available to be wrecked. We had to build the train if we wanted to destroy it. To shoot it practically was extremely challenging. not just to execute, but also to design all the different train cars. And it could actually function on a working railroad track. No one else in the world is doing this level of practical filmmaking.
Things got a little complicated when it came time for the inevitable crash. You know a stunt is going to be good when it sparks an international incident even before the cameras start rolling. Polish authorities were so afraid that Cruise and Company were going to blow up a 100-year-old bridge that the shoot had to relocate to a quarry in England. The bridge was fake, but the setup resulted in a very real and very awesome train crash.
The crash in the train involved multiplying factors of difficulty. You'd be chasing the train as it goes off. Every single camera had exactly one shot at getting it right.
It's not just a matter of going off, because if we do it all, we don't capture it right, what's the point?
3, 2, 1, action!
The crew captured it flawlessly, but in the actual movie, there was so much CG used to turn this muddy puddle in Derbyshire into the rushing waters of the Austrian Alps that the whole scene looks like something out of the Jungle Cruise movie. The same goes for when Cruise and co-star Haley Atwell are hanging from a dangling train car. It was filmed inside the real carriage, hooked up to a rotating rig with both actors scrambling to stay in control of their movements, but all of the CGI furniture and background plates just suck the tension out of the sequence. In the end, it's somehow less thrilling and convincing than the tutorial level in Uncharted 2, a video game from 2009. Then, after all that, Ethan escapes the CIA by speed flying, and this might be the weirdest stunt in the history of the franchise.
Tom's doing a sport very few people on this planet do. It's called speed flying.
It's a very beautiful and delicate sport.
But it also is one of the most dangerous sports in the world.
Speed flying is kind of like paragliding, only instead of chilling high up in the air, you're deliberately staying close to the ground and flying as fast as possible.
We're gonna do spirals. And we're landing in at incredibly high speed, over 80 kilometers an hour.
They trained for years, developed a special gimbal system to capture the action, and endured days of awful weather just to nail the stunt.
Flying very close to rocks looks quite beautiful. Behind the scenes, we were all in absolute terror.
Now here's the problem. None of that terror comes across on screen. All of that effort, all that preparation, and all of that risk translated into about 30 seconds in the actual movie. It actually seems really chill, with Ethan flying down to land near Benji as peaceful music and voiceover narration brings us leisurely into the end credits. It does not feel like Tom Cruise was at risk of smashing his face into a mountain. It feels like a stunt in search of a story, like McQuarrie and crew wanted to do something with speed flying, couldn't figure it out, filmed it anyway, and threw it into the picture at the last second. It's a perplexing end to a movie that overall just feels kind of strange. The lack of cohesion and reliance on digital touch-ups in DRPO almost betrays a lack of confidence, which isn't something we usually associate with Cruise and his Mission Impossible franchise. The stunts themselves just seemed off in the final film, and judging from the box office, audiences felt the same. DRPO's failure to make a profit could be chalked up to a lot of things, like the misfortune of releasing smack in the middle of the Barbenheimer phenomenon of 2023, or the controversial killing of Rebecca Ferguson's fan favorite, Ilsa Faust. Frankly, all of the promotional behind-the-scenes footage released in the run-up probably didn't help. By the time the film actually released, we had seen Cruise ride his bike off that cliff so many times, it didn't really feel necessary to watch him do it in the actual movie. Cruise, McQuarrie, and the entire crew clearly worked extremely hard and took on big risks with DRPO, while simultaneously writing the book on how to make movies in an age of social distancing. No one can fault them for that, even if the movie turned out to be mid. We will gladly give them a mulligan on this one, especially with the final reckoning right around the corner. After wisely dropping the Part 2 from the title, Cruise and McQuarrie have pulled out all the stops for what could be the end of an impossible era. With a rumored $400 million budget, which would make it the fourth most expensive film of all time, they definitely want your butt in the theater seat for this one. That might be why they've been playing things a little closer to the chest when it comes to the stunts.
Hi, everyone. Wish I could be there with you. I'm sorry for all the extra noise. As you can see, we are filming the latest installment of Mission Impossible. And right now, we're over gorgeous Spider Canyon in stunning South Africa. And we're making this film for the big screen for audiences to see in your wonderful theaters.
Okay, maybe not that close to the chest. That footage was from CinemaCon 2022, which Cruise could not attend in person because he was too busy crawling around the wings of a vintage biplane.
You can't imagine how physically punishing it was for Tom to be on the wing. The wind distorts your vision. It's almost impossible to breathe.
Wing walking is an old-timey act of daredevilry, a bizarre fad from the 20s and 30s when performers would exit their planes and walk around them mid-flight. Like a lot of Cruise's stunts, it's something he dreamed of doing since he was a kid, only instead of chugging along at 40 or 50 miles per hour, he is hanging on for dear life as the plane plummets through the air at speeds nearly triple that and doing his best not to pass out from lack of oxygen. If you squint, you can kind of make out a dude in a green suit at the controls, but besides that, we've been assured that not one single shot was not on a plane flying for real. That sounds like Tom Cruise, all right, and so does some more extremely risky underwater action.
Everything we're doing is underwater. We all know it's a dangerous environment. We've developed hand signals underwater, talking to understand depth, pull, frame, do it again, all of these things. There's a lot of stuff happening.
Apparently, this one is supposed to be even wilder than the biplane, though again, we don't know that much yet. Not many people were invited to the set, except for an Australian morning show.
When Tom wanted to film the submarine scenes, there just wasn't a tank big enough, so he's built one. And now this is the biggest underwater stage in the world, but filming in here isn't simple.
How do I prepare something so that we're, every day's game day? What's gonna happen? What's the day gonna be like? And I'm just thinking, how do I prepare?
And a bunch of influencers who got to live the dream of getting a safety lecture from Tom Cruise himself.
Thank you for being here. This is an active set. There's a lot to go over. It's going to be coming at you pretty hard.
It appears that Cruise will be navigating a giant rotating tank filled with 2 million gallons of water and a ton of debris, wearing a special diving suit and mask that forces him to breathe in his own carbon dioxide. You don't need a bunch of TikTokers to tell you that whatever he's cooking is going to be literally so crazy.
This Mission Impossible, that was crazy I've ever seen in my life.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The crew filmed in negative 40-degree weather in Svalbard.
Take your gloves off for a few seconds. Your fingers start to freeze.
Being in an environment like that adds to the suspense and the drama.
And at some point, someone makes the extremely ill-advised decision to hand Tom Cruise the keys to an aircraft carrier.
You gave him an aircraft carrier?
If this truly is the final reckoning for Ethan Hunt, then he's going out with a bang.
I need you to trust me. One last time.
We'll have to see if this truly is the final reckoning for Tom Cruise. They've been coy about it in the run-up to the film, although the title might be a giveaway that old Ethan Hunt might be riding off into the sunset. And can you blame him? After 8 films, thousands of hours of training, and dozens of death-defying feats, the IMF's most extreme agent is definitely due for a little R&R. It might not be the last Mission Impossible movie, or even the last one featuring Tom Cruise, but even if he retired today, he would leave behind a legacy that raised the bar for cinematic action and accomplished his mission of saving this struggling industry.
We're seeing some movies.